I remember in particular a few times running into Michael Brecker. And I would say to Michael, the first time I said, my Michael. And before I could get it out, like, man, you are the boss. He's like, man, I love your sound, right? I'm like, me? So that part of it was instructive and revelatory for me to understand that share something that's important to you, that is beautiful to you, that is funky or cool to you, to share that without reserve. Don't worry about messing up.
I had the incredible honor and privilege to sit down with one of my favorite saxophonists, Kirk Whalum. We met up at the Gen Conference in Atlanta and had an amazing conversation about the saxophone, life, learning music, and a whole lot more. I hope you enjoy our conversation as much as I did. I'm honored to be with Kirk Whalum
Mon
here in
frère.
Atlanta. Yeah, Brother Kirk. So, man, I did not know you were francophone. We just had this whole great conversation in...
C'est fou.
C'est fou. Yeah, this whole great conversation in French. You speak French great, man.
Merci. Yeah, I started trying to, in ninth grade, where they said, well, you got to pick a language, either Spanish or French. I ended up learning both, but I started with French. And man, I just wanted to speak it. I got a chance through Wanda Sandel, always mention her name, my French teacher in college at HBCU called Texas Southern. And she said, you should try out for the scholarship. I said, man, you're being very nice, but I'll never win that scholarship, because it's like Rice University, all these big, schools going out for the scholarship to study at l'Alliance Française, the French Alliance in Paris. And I'm like, it'll never happen. She said, you have nothing to lose. You should just try. And sure enough, I got it. And so I studied there for 3 months, stayed with a French family, who we have since then. Again, I was 19. I'm 66, and we are still close to that family. She passed away, but they both passed. But man, what an incredible experience. And they didn't, speak English to me at all. And so it was sink or swim.
And that's why you learn so well, so fast. Isn't that? And now I know you could speak to this. And this is something I like to talk about with people all the time. But first of all, the similarities between music, especially jazz and improvisation, and language, and how those things go together, and your experience with learning French in a sink or swim situation, and how you can create situations like yourself in music.
Yep. Yeah. So the obvious thing, the on the nose factoid is that, yes, this is a language that we're learning. Some of us come into it with certain gifts, and others with different gifts, but either way, we're trying to get the syntax and the grammar and all of that of a language, the vocabulary, a language called music. And the first time I played in Japan in 1985 with Bob James, I realized, I'm like, man, I'm able to break and enter into these people's hearts without having to process any verbiage. And it just has guided my career. Of course, my ministry, all this is wrapped together for me. But to be able to communicate with people beyond and above language is such a blessing. But the thing I'll point out is that maybe people don't, it's not quite on the nose, and that is that in language, the way that you learn, really the primary way that you learn a particular lesson or memorize a particular verb, what do you call it, conjugation or whatever, is when you make a mistake. There is this thing that happens in your brain, some endorphin or whatever, that happens when someone corrects you. And it does not feel good. And you messed it up, but then you remember that thing, right? So the way you remember a particular thing in language, as far as I'm concerned, man, is making a mistake. Go ahead and try. When you make a mistake and someone's kind enough to correct you, That's how you get it. You experience that feeling of that doesn't feel good. But that's the thing that helps you learn. And that's what same with music.
Absolutely. And a big part of that is maybe overcoming the fear of making mistakes,
Right.
allowing yourself to make, because that's, I know, holds a lot of students back. You're so afraid to maybe even try or even, and the same thing with learning languages. Some people,
Yeah.
if you hold yourself back too much, you're not going to benefit from those mistakes.
That's it. And we're every single human being, we're programmed to be a little self-conscious about stepping out there. I want, I'm conscious of what people think of me on the left and on the right. So, I'm always, as a human, you're timid about, I don't want to try because I don't want to mess up. And so, yeah, that is the parallel with music, but it is so very important. And I will say this, man, to this very day, Jay, I still have issues where I give myself the pep talk going in. I'm like, okay, you have a particular set of gifts. Okay, you're a preacher at heart. My relationship with God and the way that I want to share, the partager with people is really not so much about technique. But I aspire, man, and have aspired from almost the very beginning to have solid, excellent technique and to constantly be growing, building on the technique that I have, right? So that part of it, I consider myself a person who learns more slowly. It takes me longer to get there, but I have to talk myself down in any setting, especially you and I are sitting here at the Jazz Education Network, and I'm surrounded by virtuosi, and obviously with the Sax Loft, which we will chat about, with Jeff Coffin and Tia Fuller, on either side of me are people who have mastered the saxophone. So I have to go, Kirk, that's not necessarily your gift. Your gift is another thing where you go for the heart and you are able to connect with people. Not everybody can do that. So just be happy in that and continue to grow.
I love to hear you say that. And, I heard you say something similar once on stage, and it was so powerful. And it was at NAM years back, and you were playing and surrounded by these virtuoso players, and you said something similar, like pretty much that. And then you proceeded to play the killingest solo on the blues, and everybody was like, because you communicated on a level that everyone should be aspiring and aspires to be able to reach.
Right.
And as you say, we all have different gifts.
Yeah.
But I think that's a gift that everybody would really like to have,
Well, I'm grateful for that, and I do think that the language metaphor is super important for students of this instrument to strive to be better every single day at the technical aspects of this instrument, of which there are many, but to never underestimate the power of just the simplicity of your desire to do good, your desire to make someone's life better, to share something that's important to you, that is beautiful to you, that is funky or cool to you, to share that without reserve. Don't worry about messing up, just do it and just go back later. You can critique yourself if you like, be careful with that, but always, appreciate when you hear these great players, appreciate it and just learn from them. I used to, I would run into, speaking of France, where you live, eventually I was touring there and all over Europe with Bob James and Larry Carlton. And I remember in particular a few times running into Michael Brecker. And I would say to Michael, the first time I said, my Michael. And before I could get it out, like, man, you are the boss. He's like, man, I love your sound. Right? I'm like, me? So that part of it was instructive and revelatory for me to understand that, what we just got through talking about,
And all those things that you're saying, because you mentioned earlier, the pep talk that sometimes you give yourself.
Right.
and and that's something I imagine that through lessons learned over a long period of time, you maybe after you've made some things that you considered mistakes, you might have said to yourself, okay, why am I thinking about it this way? And then you over time developed a way to say, okay, this is the mission. This is what I'm trying to accomplish here.
Right.
And don't get caught up with the other voices going on back there. I just know that's something that especially students are always dealing with. And that is, I just interviewed with Ted Nash, talked about the same thing yesterday. And this is something that comes up, and I think it's so important for people, because when they hear you play, or Michael Brecker, or any great players, everyone thinks it's, it just is automatic.
Right.
And I think it's really helpful to know that there is always this element of, okay, no, I have to,
Yeah.
Everyone's kind of dealing, at every level, we're still dealing with these similar things.
That's really important to note, that there never comes a point, as far as I know, anybody I've ever met, including Sonny Rollins, that, say, yeah, well, I'm there, and, touch me if you can. You can't touch this,
Right.
But I remember distinctly the first time I met him, after the gig, he was like, "Ah, man, and, he used to talk like this. He said, it's not happening, man. It's not happening. And we're sitting there going like, if it's not happening for you after what I just heard, then I give up,
Right.
Yeah, but it's something we have to all deal with that.
Yeah. Tell me about the Sax Loft.
Yes. So Jeff Coffin had this crazy idea that he and myself and Tia Fuller would sort of create a space, virtual space, where a loft where people could come and hang, and kind of the anti, like, getting all worked up about, blah blah blah, but kind of hang and say, man, can you share with me? I'm having this problem. Can you help me out? And so that's what it's about. It's about, our saying is, let's hang. So hopefully in an environment, again, we share video tutorials, and we try to create, or we do create, actual, live spaces where we entertain questions and we go back and forth with people. But it is about that. It's about this camaraderie that we have, you and I have, that all of us who pursue this instrument and look up to the heroes of this instrument, that we can share stories and share maybe, pedagogical, tools and things to try to get better.
And a lot of inspiration and motivation, I imagine, just kind of, we're meeting for the first time. But I'm from seeing you on stage and listening to your music, and now meeting you, you're someone who has a knack, or let's say a gift, for kind of inspiring and motivating, not just through music, but just, I don't know, through the way you communicate with words. And I think that's so important. And that's really that might be more important than all the other stuff that we can learn about music.
Well, thank you for saying that. And I will say, man, again, walking around the halls of somewhere like Jazz Educators Network, JEN, and listening over here and listening over there, and that person's 60, this person's 20, but they're both killing on the instrument. And then you walk down further, and then there's a girl who's 15, and she's killing it, right? What you realize is that putting those notes together, kind of a linear thing where those phrases and those ideas are clever and really innovative. It's something that's always going to be there, and it's something we want to get in that flow and be able to operate in that area. But, I think you're right. When I hear Hank Crawford, when I hear Arnett Cobb, Stanley Turrentine, Grover Washington, Johnny Hodges, I don't hear that. That's not the thing that inspires me, that just makes me, try to catch my breath. It is that. It's that the spirit, who are you? It's who are you speaking through that instrument. Where are you from? Who is your tribe? What is important to you? So to me, that's way more important.
So, listening to you, and I listen to you a lot, and obviously you've got like one of the best saxophone sounds out there for me. I absolutely love it. But it feels to me like it's very front of mind for you to play in a way of a singer more and really be melodic, really be expressive.
Yes.
And that gets more of a priority than flashy technique. Not that there isn't, some of that in there, but that, I mean, and that's the sort of, that's one of the reasons I really enjoy listening to you.
Thank you so much. And yes, so the idea of trying to take a breath, and not worry about impressing someone, like, so that's the thing. It's like in all of us, I want to impress you with the cool thing I just played. But I always say it's the difference between impressing someone and impacting someone. So if you can impact someone with something that is deeper, something is more profound, something that's kind of not so much you as coming through you, to me, man, that is the ultimate. And it doesn't always happen. I always say that God's not obligated to show up, right? But when the divine shows up in a musical context, I mean, I'm sitting there looking at the past, the what do you call it? What do you call these things here? The
badges?
lanyard
Yeah.
badge for JN as a picture of Mary Lou Williams, right? And so Mary Lou Williams, to me, is a great example of that, where her life force and her empathy came through her music, and also it just transformed her life. I've been a Christian for years. My dad was a pastor, etc. But I recently converted to Catholicism a couple 3 years ago because I was serving alongside some people as in cutting hair. I'm a hack barber, and for 15 years or so, I've been cutting hair, for people who find themselves homeless or can't afford a haircut. And so that has been such a transformative experience. But that kind of came out of delving into, Mary Lou Williams' life. And so, she converted and she found herself where she cared more. It's like, I want to be a bad cat. I also want to compose and arrange and be all of that. But what I want more than any of that is to be a blessing. And so, yeah, that, it's funny that she would show up right now, but that I think is the thing that, and it doesn't mean you have to be a Christian. I mean, there are people who are atheists and Buddhists and Muslims and whatever who have that same life ethos,
Yeah, it's about, first of all, allowing that channel for something bigger than us to come through. And I feel like you need to take a moment before you play, because as we're learning this music, there's so much to learn, so much information, and that could quickly just be, all right, I'm just throwing out this information.
Right.
And it takes a certain maturity and a certain amount of time before we can learn that lesson. I'm like, no, let's take a moment. And maybe, but if you don't take that moment, how are you going to get to that level of your heroes or, your full potential? So is that something that you realized over time? Is that something you worked on, or is that something that comes naturally?
Yeah. So I definitely, sitting there, listening to my dad from the pulpit when I was, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, that is a big part of, who I am. Like, basically, I saw him do it. But you're right, you grow into yourself. Was it Descartes or one of the great philosophers talked about when you get to that place where you were trying to go, you realize you're back home, right? And that is metaphorical as well. But yeah, so being you is the thing. It's like if you can just get to the point where you can be yourself, that's one heck of an accomplishment. And it comes, as you intimated, through a whole lifetime of making mistakes, of having the wrong motivation, and then correcting that, and then just all of that is a part of it. It's a life thing that is expressed through music, and the best music is that it's a life that's expressed, through this language.
I think so much of that is also something that can hold people back as they're developing, is not having the confidence in being themselves because they feel like they have to play this way or that way, and it's a challenge to be like, you know what, you have your own voice, you have to search for it, you have to find it, but you also have to know that it's there, and then know that it can come out.
Yeah, to being, volitional, intentional, etc. I will say, a few years back, I spoke at the Gen conference, and it was what an honor to do that. I don't know that they expected me to choose the topic that I chose, but basically, I quoted John Coltrane's liner notes from A Love Supreme, which is still his best-selling record. People don't realize that. Oh, well, no, that would be giant stuff. Nope. It's A Love Supreme. The liner notes are mind-blowing, and it's all spiritual. It has nothing to do with music. And, when I quoted him, I took the liberty of saying, by virtue of this, 15-minute speech, why do we resist that so hard? Why are we constantly trying to tamp down the spirituality of this music we love? We call it jazz. Who knows for how long? Maybe it'll be called something else. But the spirituality, the spiritual core of it, is where the goods are. And any of the great, as you will attest, I know, any of the great saxophonists, great musicians that you talk to, will affirm this. That's not anything I came up with. I'm just a little more kind of unabashed about it. And I wanted to be that person to stand there and say, I am a saxophone player, I'm a jazz musician, I'm a composer, I have a Grammy for writing a song. But I need to talk to you today about something more important, and that is to connect with yourself and with the divine in a way that you're unabashedly, sharing the beauty, the spiritual beauty, the core of this music.
And that's like the ultimate. That's when you get that music like A Love Supreme or whatever when people are realizing their full potential musically, is when they can kind of be in that flow state, whatever we want to call it, And
you can come back later and hear and go, oh wow, I really didn't suck that bad. It was something that happened that I wasn't aware of, which I'll say briefly. There's also the perspective of the people who are listening. You can't get inside their heads. So, if you judge yourself based on what you think they're thinking, that's ridiculous. You just have to know that somebody there will appreciate your honesty, your candor, your vulnerability to be in that space.
Yeah, and overcoming the fear, overcoming the self-judging, and putting into your head, oh, I think these people are judging me. I think when they're just digging what you're doing most of the time.
You gotta just relax, And by the way, you use the word overcoming is a good word, because that's also something that we're doing, in the area of technical, virtuosity, that we're constantly overcoming. What would you call them? Impediments, or we're constantly trying to get better.
Yeah, bad habits,
etc. So that's why we're in this big community. And how beautiful is it? What you do, what we're hoping to do at the Sax Loft, is that you can kind of help a person, give a little shortcut here or there, or, like, oh, I never thought of it that way,
It's so rewarding for me working with people and teaching, and I think that's just part of human nature. Like when you're able to give something, and then you see that information blossom in someone else, and you see them get better. It's so rewarding, and I guess that's why I've enjoyed like the YouTube channel, and being able to do that. I really appreciate you taking the time and talking to us today. I would like to just talk about a couple of saxophone things, if we have time for that. So I have to thank Jody Espina from Jody Jazz for putting us in touch. And you're a Jody jazz artist.
I
So
am.
which mouthpiece? I know you have more than one.
I sort of evolved into, I like a lot of his pieces. The first one that really blew my mind was the hard rubber, and I'm terrible at
I know all the names, so I can
names.
help.
Okay, so
HR Star, was it?
so yes, the one, yeah, the HR Star, where so it's hard, it feels like metal.
Oh, no, you're talking about the Giant.
The giant.
Yeah, I remember
Right.
you played the Giant.
Right.
Yeah.
So, that's one that
It is metal. It
okay, yeah.
looks,
So
no, but it looks.
it looked hard rubber.
It's
That's what I mean
heavy,
to
but
say.
it's-
Yeah, it's the reverse of what I said.
Yeah.
So that I loved, and it has that feel of hard rubber, right? But it's metal. And then he sent me this hand hammered mouthpiece, and when I took, first of all, I said, this box is heavy. Is this a mouthpiece? When I took it out, I'm like, this is way too heavy. No way I'm gonna play this. I've told him the story. I set it in the drawer. I'm like, 6 months passed before I said, well, I should at least try it. And when I tried it, I'm like, oh, great. Now, I got another few pounds,
Right.
to deal with on my neck and, my 66-year-old neck. But man, that
That's a great
mouthpiece speaks, man. I really
It's a
love it.
special mouthpiece. Yeah. So is that the one you're playing
That's
mostly
what I've
now?
been playing now for, I guess now 2 years.
And what tip opening?
It's an 8-star.
8-star. Okay.
Yeah. And I play a 4 Boston Sax Shop reed, another really incredible innovation. That reed is an excellent reed.
Yeah. All right. And what horn are you playing?
So I have the 20th anniversary edition of the P. Marriott.
Oh.
And again, I'm terrible with model numbers, but it's black nickel plated, and oh my goodness, man, that instrument. My whole thing about gear in particular, but especially instruments, is that I need somebody I need an instrument designer who doesn't have an ego, because I want it to be completely, devoid of personality. I want it to be
A blank canvas.
blank canvas. That's what I'm always looking for, because I've spent all this time. I still play long tones every day, right? So after, I've been playing since my 50-some years. I still play long tones, and that's because I take seriously how I sound on the instrument. I work on vibrato, all that. So I don't want to pick up an instrument that's now going to make me sound like I'm playing a Selma or playing or whatever. And this P. Marriott is that. It's very blank. It's like, and you just got to bring whatever you have.
Yeah. I was going to say, ça s'entend. That you work on the long tones. We hear that in your sound.
Merci bien.
Because you've got just one of the most beautiful
Thank you.
tones.
Thank you.
And yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. Could you also tell us, and you said you practice long tones, a few other things, like what's in your daily routine?
Sure.
Practice?
Well, first of all, again, long tones, and then I do practice vibrato with a metronome many times. Like I'll set the metronome to 60, and I'll do 4 vibrati to every 2 clicks. Then I'll do 5 to every 2 clicks, which again, so now you're sort of getting into the zone where you're not making it, right? Then I'll do 6, then 7, again, where you're teaching yourself not to be regimented, but you do want to hear that you are making this thing happen. You listen to singers. That's my primary thing, man.
Which singers?
Primarily gospel singers. But if you listen, for instance, to Nancy Wilson, and Nancy will sing she'll just decide, I'm not going to use vibrato on this note. Boom, she's right on pitch. And then she'll bring the vibrato in, and it's just, oh, you just fall in love. Or she'll be singing over with vibrato, and then she'll take it out. And so again, it's just one more thing that you have control over. You have to have as much control over as many elements of your playing as possible. Whitney Houston was my primary inspiration in terms of listening to who you want to sound like. I showed her an article when I first started playing with her, where someone asked me, well, who do you listen to? They're thinking I'm going to say, John Coltrane. I said, Whitney Houston, and they're like, okay. I showed that to her, and it cracked her up. She's like, excuse me, you're a jazz musician. Why would you listen to me? So there's that. I always work on scale exercises. I try to do it in such a way that is not so regimented in terms of, old school. Like I'll play my scales in 7, 8, and primarily because diatonic scales, there are 7 notes. So why don't you just play them in 7? And so then I'll create other patterns using those notes. The only rule is that you can't repeat a note, right? So right. So in other words, make up stuff to make you are the boss. Make it harder for yourself, right? So that's that. You know, the sort of Jamie Abersole type things where I'll sit there with the app or whatever and go through changes. Something Jeff does to you as well, where you know, take a song, moment's notice, for instance, and go a half step up, you know, and then go another half step. Just try to make sure you learn every key. That's a Sonny Stitt thing. Man, I mean, there's other stuff, but I think a lot of it is, you know, come by the Sax Loft and ask me. But no, a lot of it is really just be the boss. Like, take the initiative. Don't wait for the books. Yeah, the books are great. And, you know, Slonimsky, I've gone through all those books, you know, Etudes by Cargulier and Boats, all that stuff, man. You know, the literature, absolutely. But there's stuff that you can take, again, you figure it out. What's the next thing that you can do to make that harder on yourself, and then learn that in every key.
Right, because you always want to be in that just a little outside of your comfort zone, because if you're practicing stuff you know how to do, you're not going to get any better. And if you're trying to do stuff that's too hard, you're going to get frustrated and you're not going to have a good, efficient practice session.
Joie de faire.
Yeah.
So there's a part of it that you definitely don't want to frustrate yourself, right? You want to try to, you know, don't jump. Like if you go up the steps, you don't jump to the 12th step. You know, if you're going to do that, just take the elevator. But what you do is you take the step at a time. And that is really the way this is done. Like, create the next thing that's a little bit harder. But if you go too hard, then you just frustrate yourself.
Yeah. And it's a never-ending thing, because you could be doing it for forever. And there's you could always increase the difficulty by that much.
Well, one way that you want to answer someone who says, God, I don't know about the whole God thing. Listen, music is the very best evidence that there is a divine, because it's infinite. It is absolutely infinite.
Man, let's leave it there, because that's fantastic. I know you've got a lot of things going on, but this has been...
Entonces, muchas gracias. Estoy completamente, agradecido por tu presencia aquí.
Wow. And so your accents are really good too. No, but when you were talking about the how music is like a language, it's your accent. It's the pronunciation of things. And that is what we're doing with our sound, and the articulation and the nuance, right?
Yeah.
And that's the things that really make that difference.
I had not thought about that. Thank you for the whole accent part, because yes, people say to me, hey, I want to play soulful. What do you... I'm like, no, it ain't that, man. It's not, whatever inflection. It's about connect to your heart, listen to singers, and do what they do.
Yeah, it's a mimicking, and that's how we learn to speak. Yeah.
Accent.
It's a whole full circle thing. All right. Once again, thank you so much.
Bientôt.
À très bientôt, j'espère.